Times an appropriate greeting to you and welcome back to the channel. With capes fluttering in the wind and spandex underwear firmly on top of their costumes, I'm joined today by the Hobby Hero Double Team, whose bi-weekly podcast mainly involves hobby procrastination and epic hints and tips. Welcome, Dave and Rich from the Floorhammer Podcast.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
Cheers, Matt. Yep.
I'm not sure if spandex and double team should be in the same sentence when talking about us, but let's skip past that.
It's all quiet from Rich, so 1 out of 2 of you agree with that. So,
well, you know, I'm just that's a kind of intro that I'm used to from Dave. So, you know,
hey, it's better than my ones.
So, guys, welcome to the bunker, where we'll be doing this hobby community spotlight showcase, blah 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 thing, and it's going to follow a standard set of questions which I'll ask everyone, and then we'll diverge into much divergence around yourselves, podcasting, 9th edition, YouTubes. So let's jump into it, Rich. How did you get into the hobby of tabletop wargaming?
I was first introduced to 40k by my good friend Paul in the late 90s with 2nd edition, and I absolutely hated it. It was incredibly complicated and he had no idea what he was doing. But I got hooked into the art and the style of everything by Final Liberation, the epic 40k PC game, which was, Dave was barely old enough to use a computer mouse when that came out.
Straight over my head.
Yep. And Lord of the Rings finally got me pulled in. Big Lord of the Rings fan, and when the movies came out and that Fellowship of the Ring box set came out, I went to store and one intro game later, and now I'm poor for life.
Yeah, that's exactly the same for me. It was the Lord of the Rings Fellowship box set, £60 from, I think it was like a WH Smith, which is like a newsagent's, glorified newsagents in the UK here. And I remember just sort of pleading with my mum to buy these plastic miniatures, and I got it, took it home, sprayed it, enormous amount of colours, and dabbed paint all over it. And yeah, it was only a few years after that I actually got into 40k. So yeah, no, I think that was the intro to my tabletop wargaming career. It was the good old Lord of the Rings Fellowship.
Career? Are you suggesting we get paid, Dave?
I wish. One day.
What sort of hobbyist are you? A painter, collector, gamer, or a bit of a mix, Dave?
Ooh, I think it's changed over the years. I used to be a massive gamer, so I always used to buy stuff that I was going to paint up and play with. It was always with a deadline of like a campaign weekend, or a deadline because I want to get this on the tabletop, and I used to go down the store every week. With life and stuff in general getting in the way, I've moved over to more of a collector and painter. So often I paint stuff that I like the look of rather than I'm going to use. Always part of an army, and I'll eventually get around to using, but my collection of armies, usually not all of the models make the tabletops, but I like painting. I do probably eventually want to transition to collecting and maybe just paint some display models, sort of get some busts going in a display cabinet, but that'll be one day when a new shiny thing doesn't take my fancy.
So never then.
Pretty much. You know the routine.
And yourself, Rich?
Yeah, I'm way more into the gaming side than I are the painting. I do like to paint models, obviously, but I'm not as into it as Dave probably is. Mm-hmm. I'm way more into terrain building and painting, though. That's my real passion. That's my thing. Started with actually having some space to have some gaming terrain, and since then I've been hooked completely.
Yeah, I'm pretty much the same. Recently, I got a Creality Ender 3.
Oh, yes.
And I've been slightly addicted to backing Kickstarters.
Yeah, anything on Kickstarter is difficult because you're like, this is really cool. What a great deal. I'll back it on Kickstarter. Then another really cool thing comes out. And that first thing hasn't necessarily been delivered to you yet. So you don't feel like, oh, I've got this thing I should do. You're like, oh, cool, another cool thing to back. It's like the shiny thing syndrome, except your other pile of shame isn't sitting there to remind you because it's often digital. It just hides. It's dangerous.
So what game systems do you both play? Are you simply now more gearing towards 40k, or do you play other games, Rich?
I definitely play way more 40k. Obviously not 2020 with lockdown, but generally speaking, way more into 40k and Kill Team. I have dabbled in endless number of other games in the past, but now with more responsibilities at work, ramped up commitments at home with family life, etc., there's a lot less time. So I've kind of had to be more focused. And 40k and Kill Team go hand in hand because they use the same models. 40k is the thing I love the most. And so I've kind of focused in on those. But Dave and I do have some Age of Sigmar project work on the horizon. So we might add Age of Sigmar and or Warcry into that mix.
Yeah, I think Warcry and Kill Team fall into the same category of the skirmish game of the bigger game. But no, I'm very much like Rich. Although I haven't played too many other game systems in the past, and I am hesitant to pick up new game systems because I get them confused and it's all convoluted. It's probably a reason why I haven't picked up Necromunda, because I love the aesthetic, but I've never sort of got round to learning the rules and getting on with it. So yeah, 40k and a bit of Kill Team here and there is my main sort of draw to the hobby. But I'm a big video games player, so my other spare time and rule systems that I need to remember are geared around video games instead.
Yeah, don't get him started about World of Warcraft. Matt would be here for weeks.
So you're both involved in like the smaller skirmish games. Is there a worry in that community about maybe like a sudden lack of support for either systems?
I don't know, because the ones that we highlighted, Kill Team and Warcry, the models come from the bigger games, so there's never going to be a lack of models for them, and I think it's just a case of getting some rules written for them to use specifically in those game formats. In Warcry especially, there are specific models that are designed for Warcry, so I think that is slightly more supported than the Kill Team equivalent. But I don't think it's a sort of a short-term thing. I think they'll be around for a long time as a quick skirmish game version of the real thing, and it's also like an entry level game to the bigger game. I mean, if you buy a box, you can play a Kill Team game with are they free rules, Rich? Do you remember?
No, I think you still have to buy the core rules.
Right.
But I mean,
It's a box and a rule set. Yeah,
you own the models. You own the models the majority of the time. So much is in that core Kill Team rule book as well. There are loads of upgrades with the elites and command and all that sort of thing. But I think there's enough in that core rule book that people use it as like an entry point as well. I mean, you've had colleagues, Dave, at work. You kind of hooked into playing some Kill Team on lunch breaks and stuff like that. Like when you were back in the office, like it's an easy way to get people in.
It takes like 45 minutes for a game. It's perfect.
Yep. So when you're both young and innocent and had slightly more hair, what's the first thing that caught your eye when you were starting out? Was it like the models or the lore or the community?
Well, I think I was at that point. I'm, believe it or not, a bit younger than Rich.
Shocking.
Yeah, and it was always the models that drew me in. I've always been a sort of a big sci-fi fantasy fan, but never sort of I wasn't old enough to appreciate the sort of the lore and the cinematic style behind it. I just thought the models were cool, or the characters were cool, and then obviously going into tabletop, the models were cool. So it's definitely the models. I think it was Tau. So after the Lord of the Rings debacle, and I wanted to go into guns and stuff because that's what sort of young, maybe early teenagers, late, maybe early double figures Showing my age or lack of. But yeah, I think it was the tower. The tower relatively new, sort of only sort of been around for 4 or 5 years. I think this was end of third edition, maybe start of fourth edition. And I just loved the Crisis battle suits and the Tau Devilfish. So I picked up a few of those, and I mean, from there, that was my love of the 40k model range, albeit with a mini hiatus between.
Yeah, I was definitely drawn in by the fluff and the artwork. Like the models are cool, don't get me wrong, but I was really captivated by even the modern art for me still does look better than the older stuff, but the nostalgia hit from seeing that like late 90s artwork is still strong, and I love the ridiculous scale of it all. That's what really drew me into 40k, is the bizarre, ridiculous scale of the universe and settings and battlefields, etc.
What advice would you give someone just starting out in the hobby now, or maybe your younger self now you've been involved in the hobby for a while, Rich?
I think it's all about finding what makes you happy in the hobby. I would definitely have advised myself on this, and we covered this in a relatively recent show, to find your contentment with the hobby. It's too easy to feel pressured into keeping up with what you see on especially Instagram and social media now, and to feel like you're not doing enough of a good enough job, or that you should be doing more hobby, or that you should be being more all the things, the should thoughts, is to try and sort of push those away and focus on the bits that you actually enjoy, because there is no right or wrong way to do the hobby at the end of the day. If you're doing the things that you enjoy, and being respectful of people enjoying different elements of the hobby, I think that you're onto a winner, because that's what's going to make you happy. And at the end of the day, it is a hobby. It feels like a lifestyle sometimes, but it's something you should be doing. Well, it's not should be. It's something that is often done by people for enjoyment. So to try and find that enjoyment first.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm going to approach this from somebody getting into the hobby, and I think just follow the rule of cool, because there's so much technology around. You read up on these armies and you see what's good and what's the best and what can kill other things. And I find that if I don't like the look of something, I'm less motivated to paint it, to play with it. I don't care if it's really, really good. Like, for example, the Eradicators, I like the look of them, but it's not the first thing I painted from the Indomitus set. I know they're really good and they're really cool, and they can kill tanks left, right, and centre. But I mean, I haven't even built them from my Indomitus set yet. And yeah, I think just go with something, the units or the army that you like the look of, and you're much more likely to stick to it. But I mean, I wouldn't tell myself getting into the hobby to do anything differently, because I am where I am today from the mistakes and stuff that I did when I was younger. If I hadn't looked at the Tau and painted a really, really badly ultramarine scheme Captain Tycho, I think it was, yeah, I would not be where I am today with all my cool armies.
Have either of you ever had an extended period out of the hobby, maybe through just it not being cool or moving away?
Yeah, well, I mentioned it earlier, the hiatus. I took a few years away from the hobby, and I guess it was just going through school and college, and I didn't really have that interaction with the models, because when I grew up in the sort of the generation of the PS2 and the Xbox 360, and that was much more appealing, and I was quite sporty, and Warhammer wasn't very cool, I guess. And then as you grow older, you look past that. It's not something that you need to appeal to everyone else. It just needs to excite you. And yeah, it was listening to the audiobooks that got me back into it, and that's when the lore and the cinematic element of the Warhammer 40,000 universe really kicked off for me, was listening to audiobooks, and that's what got me back in.
Yeah, conversely, I never took a break, because I got into the hobby I think it was with that Lord of the Rings stuff. I was like 17. So I had done like Airfix and that sort of thing. And it was just something that I could kind of enjoy without having to worry about that. So I never really took a break. You know, the honeymoon period in the hobby for me was that college uni time where everybody else usually ducks out, whereas that was when I was most excited by this cool new hobby that I'd found, and really got into it then, and it stuck all the way through.
So, Rich, what's the best part about the hobby for you?
I mean, I mentioned the terrain building aspect, and that's as a recent discovery, but it's the creativity part. Like I do love gaming, but sadly gaming time for me is like less than 10% of the hobby time, and while it's really good fun, it's what you're usually gearing up towards. The bit that gives me the most enjoyment and the best part for me, I think, is the building and painting, and again, that's the terrain focus for me. It's quite freeing working with terrain. It's a lot more, you can be a bit more wildly creative without worrying about messing stuff up. And I really like that. I don't like to pressure myself to do the best job. With terrain, you can kind of be a bit more haphazard and not have to worry about things spilling over onto each other or whatever, because it's super easy to cover up a mistake. So you can kind of try new stuff and not stress about it. That works really well for me.
And Dave, yourself, what's the best part about the hobby for you?
I would have to say, back when we were gaming, it was the different weekends away that we had up at Warhammer World. That was by far the sort of the highlights of my hobby experience. I mean, there's nothing better than sort of going up to Warhammer World with a load of mates and sort of playing 5, especially if we're in a campaign weekend, 5 sort of cinematic games where your results count towards a big sort of global campaign. And it's all sort of story led, and there's loads of camaraderie, and it's a great experience, especially if you've got like doubles games mixed in as well. So I don't think anything beats that for me. And I can see Rich nodding. He's probably along those same lines as well.
Yeah, those weekends were great. Just everyone on the same wavelength to play the games, to have fun, and really get something out of it.
And Dave, on the flip side, what's the worst part about the hobby, or a part that you think could be improved?
I mean, for me, it's the lows of the roller coaster of motivation. When I had my son, I lost my study, and then lost my permanent hobby setup. So when I'm on a sort of a hobby low, and I sort of want to hobby maybe for 10 minutes to do one or two things, I don't really want to spend 15 minutes setting up, getting all the sort of the daylight lamp out, getting the water ready, the wet palette, that sort of thing out, and I just lose focus, I lose motivation, and then I sort of get annoyed at myself for losing that motivation. So I think that's probably the worst part of the hobby for me. Is nothing to do with the hobby itself. I think it's just my motivation and my procrastination levels hit the roof when it comes to something, especially if it's something boring like a load of base coats or something. And
yourself, Rich?
Oh, for me, it's got to be 2 words: edge highlighting.
Oh, come off it.
No, jokes aside, it's the hobby chores, shall we say, that is encapsulated by edge highlighting. So I don't particularly enjoy doing it at all. But all those things that you have to do to get the stuff finished. There's the fun parts where you're being more creative and expressing yourself, and then there's things like painting the rims on your bases black and stuff like that. And you know they need doing, and they need to be done in order to tick it off your list. But for me, it will frequently sit there as I'm looking around my desk now, surrounded by things that are 95% done, but I just can't get the motivation to do those last bits. And the new shinies, as you mentioned, Matt, kind of draw me in, and then, I'm onto something else. And those hobby chores, I need to kind of, I sit down and just sometimes have a chores session where I do all those bits that need to be done just to get them off my list.
Okay. No one mentioned the comment section, the Warhammer community Facebook posts.
skirted around that, I think.
You really want to poke the dragon halfway through the interview, Matt? That was bold. Yes, yes, I could have dwelled on the community, which is both the most wonderful and supportive thing in the hobby, and also the most dire mess sometimes. So yeah, let's not get into that too much.
The despicable 1%.
Yes.
So what keeps you in the hobby, Dave? What keeps you rolling dice and buying war dollies?
Probably the podcast. No, I always mention it. I love the cinematic universe of 40k. Just the whole sort of Imperium besieged on all sides, the cool sort of once farmers or once emerging species, the Tau with all their technological sort of constructs, the Great Devourer of the Tyranids, and just all of those elements. And it's so deep as well. It's not just one line in a codex just to give them a bit of background. There's tons and tons of lore and stuff behind it. And you almost forget that sometimes it's a tabletop game. You can just get lost in the audiobooks and the novels and just the different storylines as well. I mean, everything from the Horus Heresy and like the Beast that Rises series all the way to all of the modern, even some of the Space Marine Battles books. Some of them miss, but some of them hit really hard. And I think one of my favourite books is Hell's Reach. I mean, shock horror, it's a Black
Surprise!
Templar.
Yeah.
Wow.
But no, I mean, it really sort of puts me in the mood to paint Black Templars when I read that sort of thing and listen to all of the cool things, and my imagination runs wild, and I have like 10 different lists or army ideas that I want to create. So yeah, I mean, you can tell I still love 40k to this day.
And Rich, yourself, what keeps you pulled in and suckling at the bosom of 40k?
Well, it's definitely the background that Dave's already spun a wonderful yarn about that I don't need to go into. But it's also good to have a creative outlet. Like I actually realise I'm quite a creative person. I like to make things. So having the hobby side there to do that is really great. But I guess I'm also kind of lucky that a lot of my friends have been made through the hobby and continue to be kept through the hobby, including Dave, I suppose.
Yeah.
And you know, social media has been a big help in this. Like, I know social media can be a horrendous place to get lost in things, and we won't dwell on that. But the positive side of social media and constantly being able to connect with people who are passionate about the hobby. I mean, you know, we've never actually met you in person, Matt, but you've come out on our hobby hangout, and we're always interacting on social media. And the same can be said for loads of different people. And it's just great to have that constant, I don't know, shared passion. And if you're polite and respectful, then generally speaking, every single interaction you'll have is a positive one. And it's, especially now more than ever, with people not seeing each other and not getting to the events that Dave mentioned, like having a way to constantly be able to talk hobby with almost anybody is really great.
Yeah, I've always been asked, why am I so positive? You know, what positive outlook in the hobby? Because I don't have enough time to hobby as it is. So why should I waste that small amount of time being negative? You know, so
exactly.
It doesn't make sense to me. It's
no,
it's lost.
I cannot understand how people choose to be negative about the hobby. There are obviously, everyone has things that annoy them about the hobby sometimes, and sometimes GW will bring out something and I think, oh, that's a load of rubbish. I really don't like that. But then,
like contrast paints.
Shut up! I completely turned around on them. Don't you start. But you know, there's, like you say, there's no time for that, and it's not necessary. I keep those thoughts to myself, or I might say them to Dave. I might say, like, this isn't very good, is it? But I recognise that's my opinion on it. I don't like it. It's probably great for somebody else, so I just don't need to say that out loud to the general hobby community, because let's not ruin something that somebody else is enjoying. If you don't like it, that's cool. Keep that to yourself and move on. Just say nothing. But people struggle with saying nothing, I think, sometimes. If I could choose to say nothing, then other people can do the same. Is my
you are my benchmark.
Thank you, Dave.
So dwelling on the negative side of the hobby, sometimes it's can be affected by a burnout or lack of hobby mojo. How do you both deal with this sort of situation with regarding to like not filling up to painting or maybe skipping a few weeks gaming? Start with Dave.
We've mentioned this topic a lot on our podcast because it hits home with both of us. But for me, to get out of a lack of motivation, I've mentioned it before, the lore and sort of listening to an audio book or picking up a novel, something like that, or deadlines as well. So if I've got a game coming up or one of those aforementioned campaign weekends, I know I need to finish my army. So that will motivate me to carry on. And once you start finishing models and you've done it and you've varnished it, then that really adds to the momentum, and you can keep going. Because gone are the days where I could pull an all-nighter to finish off, say, like a Salamander's army for a campaign weekend the very next day. That was not a specific example.
Of course not. That's definitely completely made up.
But yeah, it's I think playing games as well, when you actually have a closely fought, exciting game where lots of stuff happens, and especially if you know the person, you can exchange sort of WhatsApp messages after the game. You get really excited, and maybe something that is just grey plastic performed really well, and you want to paint it up because it's really cool and it's going to be like the mainstay of your army. That really motivates me to get out the paints and get painting.
Yeah, I used to stress about it a lot. If I was having a non-productive run, I would feel quite anxious about the fact that I should be being more productive and I should be doing more. And I used to make myself then do the hobby chores that I hate to do. But now I kind of recognise that it's absolutely fine to take a step back and either do something completely different, play a different game, or play some video games, or watch some movies in your spare time, or do something that's not hobby related and not feel bad that you should be being more productive. But then I'm also like Dave, like a piece of lore, either a novel or some sort of book or something to kind of draw you back in, or listening to other podcasts. I mean, obviously we do a podcast, but there are plenty of other ones out there, and sometimes just listening to somebody else be passionate about the hobby kind of reignites things. I mean, with many things that are creative, forcing yourself to be enthusiastic about it, etc., is almost impossible, but you can very easily feed off of somebody else's love for the hobby.
Yeah, I mean, just to follow on to Rich's point, we often make a joke of my lack of hobby progress, but that is totally fine if you don't feel like painting anything for 2, 3, 4 weeks, even 2, 3, 4 months. That's totally fine. It's not a race, and those deadlines are all in your head. Unless you're going to a tournament where everything has to be painted, just take it at your own pace, I think.
Has anyone inspired your hobby, style, or life, Rich?
Oh, definitely. I mean, we've talked about different people on our show and different community resources, but Mel, the terrain tutor, was a massive influence on not just me doing terrain, but kind of his approach to the hobby, where it's again, it's that mentality of doing the things and finding the things that you enjoy in the hobby and kind of focusing on those. And the same, another guy called Jeremy from Black Magic Craft, big YouTube channel, where he frequently shows his mistakes, and you know, if he's completely screws something up, and he does that for a living, like he completely screws something up, he won't hide it or say that it didn't happen and not present that perfect Instagram image of what the hobby should be like. And I think that's kind of made me stop and look at my own hobby and be like, yeah, nothing's going to be perfect, and there are things that are going to go okay, things that are going to go bad, and things that you're going to be really, really happy with, and to kind of, you know, focus on the bits that make you happy. And if something goes wrong, play with it anyway. And if you want to fix it, then fix it, but don't feel like you have to fix it. Because at the end of the day, generally speaking, if you're just doing this as a hobbyist, no one's judging your stuff, only yourself. And so you've got to try to be a bit kinder to yourself sometimes, I think.
And Dave, yourself, has anyone really pushed their style and aided yours?
Recently, yes. I mean, I've always followed the Games Workshop style of base coat, wash, base coat up and then edge highlights. So it's always been that sort of methodical way of painting that is just like I have not got to a point where Rich has talked about it on the podcast, where he's got to a point where his stuff does not need to be parade ready for him to be proud of it. I haven't got to that point yet, and it's perfectly fine to not be at that point. So I always have to go for the whole sort of parade ready. So I'm not happy with something until it's finished, and that includes all of the base coat and all the edge highlighting and everything perfect. So yeah, I mean, it's the Games Workshop style. The Warhammer TV recently, I say recently, in the last few years, where they've come out and they've started doing their tutorials, are perfect. But in the last few months, I've really got into the whole sort of grim dark style, and that's very much contributed to. I've started liking John Blanche's, not necessarily artwork, because I mean that's a bit Marmite for a lot of people in the hobby, but the style, I guess, not the actual artwork that he's done, but the inspiration that it gives people. And there's a specific YouTube account called Zach Cascagoon Miniatures, who does the Grimdark Compendium. You might have seen him on Instagram, and it's very much the dark horror style of 40k, which, I mean, if you think about it, the 40k universe is a horrific place to live. And when you go into that grimdark style, it really shows that horrible style of like a grotty underhive world. It's not all sort of fighting on green grass battlefields where people die by falling over. It's horrific. But army-wise, I think it's got to be Matt Hudson's Black Templars. I don't know if you've ever seen them, but they sort of inspired me to sort of look down into the Black Templar sort of army, and then I started reading up on them, and I like the whole, not necessarily the idea of it, but the whole Crusades aesthetic back in sort of ye olde English history, and sort of the noble knights, and converting those to sort of the Space Marine with squires as the scouts, that sort of thing. It's really he really inspired me when he showed his whole sort of Black Templar army in one of the old White Dwarves, and then he became the editor of White Dwarf as well, and he had a few influences on that as well. So he really kept me going for the Templar, and I've been blowing that trumpet ever since.
And we might have run into him at Warhammer Fest, and you might have talked his ear off for about 30 minutes, and until he had to pretend he had an emergency or something like that to get out of it. It was pretty close, Dave. You were like 5 minutes away from his phone mysteriously ringing.
Yeah. No, I love the guy, and he's got loads of time for everyone.
Yeah, he has. Nice guy.
Do you guys plan out armies, or do you get sucked in with buying all the new shiny gubbins, Rich?
I was very much of a mixture of getting lured in by the shiny gubbins, and also really trapped into the fear of missing out mindset on box sets and things like that when they came out. I'm like, oh, I might want to do that army someday, and look at that deal, it's so good. I'm terrible. I'd never spend that money on it individually. I've got to buy the box set and then stick it in the cupboard, and however long it sits there for. I'm way more going to be influenced in the future, I think, by Dave's approach to this, which I'm sure he will share in a minute, and kind of have to change the way I do it, because I really do get sucked in to purchases like that, and then the hobby guilt kicks in, and then I make myself do it, even though I probably was actually never really going to get round to it. So it's not the best combination, and I recognize that I need to kind of shift my perspective on that.
Yeah, I to follow on from your question, I really plan out armies. I write lists, and I only buy the stuff that I've pre-made, just because for budgetary reasons, with sort of being a new father, and the fact that I live in an apartment as well. It's a storage thing. I can't store loads and loads of boxes and loads of armies. So yeah, I completely plan them out, and I will only buy the units that will be in that army, and then I will start to buy individual units and paint them up before I buy anything else. As a general rule, I mean, there are exceptions, stuff like Indomitus coming out, and I jumped at that. But I mean, that's still keeping me going. I've hardly bought anything since Indomitus, and that's been out for a few months now. So I'm very methodical when it comes to the hobby. I used to have a lot more disposable income and used to throw money left, right, and centre, and I was known as a bit of a Forge World splurger. But I've definitely reined it in the last year or two.
Okay, Dave. So if your budget was unlimited, you could only buy one army, what would it be?
So I thinking about this logically.
Please don't say Black Templars.
It's going to be Black Templars.
Oh God.
I mean, I love the aesthetic. I'm motivated. If I had to start it again, then that's what I do. That's something that will keep me motivated. I mean, I've started several armies since, but Templars is always the one I go back to, and the range is so big. If I had to stick to one range, I might as well have a massive collection to choose from. And unlimited budget, you've got all the Forge World stuff. You can just have like 16 different army lists for the same amount of points in a Space Marine army, where you couldn't in, say, my Harlequins army. I couldn't put any extra units in. I've pretty much got every single unit in the Codex in like 1,500 points. So yeah, I think it's going to have to be probably the Black Templars.
I know, Rich, I'm dying inside as well.
I know, like, it's so... Real opportunity to branch out here, Dave. What are you going to do? Black Templars.
Yeah. I mean, if I've got to do that for the... Well, yeah, I interpreted the question as one army for the rest of my life.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
See, so I had a different take and thought, what would I spend money on that I would never normally spend money on? And my go-to was Adeptus Titanicus, because I think it's freaking cool, but I am not likely to have the available cash to spend on that when I don't really play it that much. So no disrespect to the game at all, it looks fantastic, but I don't think I'd ever get my money's worth out of it. So having unlimited budget, I would dive like headlong into that. I would do Legio Tempestus. So they are the ones from Titanicus, one of the best 40k novels.
If you want to read about Titans, read that. I mean, it's Dan Abnett, just to start off, and then that changed my perception on Titans being just robots.
Yeah,
they're very much human.
They're very humanized by the book, yeah. And I would go the whole hog. Like, there's some cool terrain out there that you can buy with of course, there's got to be terrain, with all the hab kits and the chapels, and now they're doing defense stations, and there's so much cool stuff. You can build a miniaturized city on your gaming table. Like, I would be all in on that, 100%.
Yeah, I bought the box set when it first came out, but then never really got into it and sold the box. But I do watch it occasionally, the 30k channel. Big shout out to David Brains, who there's a card shamelessly appearing now with an interview with him, who's done some amazing battle reports with Titanicus.
Nice. It just looks so cool.
What do you hope to improve about your hobby in the future, Rich?
I think this kind of leads on from the shifting my habits with the hobby. I think I need to be better about not getting things that I'm not going to do. And I think also I want to do a lot more hobby projects that are related to like some strong background theming. Before, I've just done I did a contrast Marines project because I had a whole load of Space Marines that I'd bought through not wanting to miss out on good offers, and I wanted to do a quick paint scheme, so I did them as the Fulminators, the Primaris chapter, but I've only used them once, and I don't kind of feel like connected to the army, to sound weird because it's an inanimate object. So I think that to make my hobby better in the future, I'm going to try and do some more projects where I'm actually really connected to the idea and the background and the story of the army before I actually get underway with it. And I think that will also help me kind of really want to finish it as well, rather than leaving it languishing half done or end up offloading stuff that I never got round to, which is always a shame when you have to do that.
At least you did finish them.
This is true. This is true. I did finish them in record time.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's I want to get into doing more display models. I want to pick up models because I want to paint them or do dioramas for. Or I mean, my favourite Golden Demon category is jewels. I'd love to make a few jewels as dioramas between sort of a few models. And maybe some busts as well, especially with when you know people with really nice 3D printers. You might be able to get some SDLs for some really cool sort of 3-up busts just to display in a cabinet. So I'd love to maybe get a Space Marine. I've seen a few nice, like a Deathcore Krieg one as well. So that's definitely something I want to go to do in the future and improve my painting to be able to do that sort of thing when it is a larger scale. So I think improving on painting so that they are up to the standard of display models.
That's perfect, guys. We're going to take the British dial up to 11, have a break, and have a cup of tea and a biscuit, and come back in a minute.
Perfect.
Yeah, cool. I could do a bio break and a drink. That sounds great.
Yeah. Freshly brewed tea in hand. Let's crack on with the second part. These are more designed towards yourselves as podcasters, and now a bit of YouTubing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, to time frame this, we're in the second week in November 2020. The UK's gone down into a second lockdown. Has that really affected your hobbying? Did you lose a mojo to hobby because of lack of supplies, or just the whole lockdown emotional thing?
I was quite the opposite, actually. I have done more hobby because there's less time to go out. I mean, we're in the second lockdown, like you say, and it's not as all-encompassing as the first one was because shops have managed to adapt and adapt to the guidelines. But the first lockdown, it was literally 1 hour outside your door and nothing was open because nothing was sort of COVID safe. So I got a lot of hobby done. I went through my backlog, which at the time was still relatively big, although I'd cleaned out a lot of stuff. I managed to make the wife happy by actually cleaning out the cupboard. I have a two shelves of shame, and I managed to get rid of one of those shelves. So yeah, I started going through the backlog, did a few random bits, and it actually felt really good to get stuff done that's been lying there for months, and in my case, a few years.
Yeah, I mean, I gained back a lot of time that was previously spent commuting. I don't have the biggest commute in the world, but I have enough that it adds up on a daily basis, and not having to do that, and therefore not having to get up as early in the morning because I was forced to work from home, and all those things added up to a lot more time. So I also got quite a bit more done. And, you know, weekends were usually... for us, you know, the family time to get out and do stuff, and there was nothing to get out and do, so we kind of had a little bit more time to do our own thing, even on weekends, and it all added up to being a lot more productive. And you know, the world felt like a strange place, so having the opportunity to be productive in your hobby was actually kind of a good thing. It really helped, but I can imagine for some people either trapped with nothing to do, or on their own, or in a situation where they didn't want to be in and couldn't get out of it. I can imagine that it was a very difficult time. So I do feel fortunate that for me, time-wise, although other problems have come out of lockdown for everyone, our family included, at least the availability of time was a big plus.
So we're now moving into Age of 9th Edition. Are you both enjoying it, Dave?
I love it. I really liked 8th edition. There were a few bits towards the end of 8th edition that I think rule bloat started to become a thing, especially with all of the Psychic Awakening stuff, and it was all piled on top of codexes that were slightly out of date. But with the the age of ninth edition. I think it scaled everything back. It fixed a lot of the issues that 8th edition had. Yes, a few people were butthurt when rules were lost for lots of things, but it's turned it into a much more streamlined game. And I have to say, on the outside, it's a big change. When you think about it, it's a small change, but when you play a game, it's a big change, and that's the smaller battlefield sizes.
Mm-hmm.
There's less time for want of a better phrase, fanning about for a turn or two when you're sort of manoeuvring around and just running onto objectives and maybe firing off a few pot shots. As soon as you move forward in these smaller games and a smaller battlefield size, you're within rapid fire range and you're killing stuff. And in my case, you're close enough for charges, and in the Tau's case, they're loving life because everything's in rapid fire range and they're destroying everything in sight. So I really like 9th edition, and they've really hammered home the narrative side of it with Crusade, and I can't wait to get my hands on some Crusade games.
Yeah, I mean, building on top of that, some of the changes that they've made, 'cause it's not a major rule shift. Things like the way they've changed how CPs work. You now no longer have to do stupid things like taking the Loyal 32 and all that nonsense to get your command points. Yes. I think it's kind of made it a little bit more of a level playing field for a lot of armies. You can play the game rather than having to worry about not having the things that you wanted. And I'm a big fan of how the rules are way more watertight in terms of loopholes and things like that. But if you don't want to quite digest the complexity of the watertight rules, there are the bullet points to show you in idiot terms, which I like, exactly what's intended by the rule. So how to actually play it. So it's a lot more, I suppose, easy to get to grips with. And I'm in a couple of games in, but I have enjoyed them so far. And I like how a lot of the missions have set battlefields as well. I mean, the match play one specifically, things are very well outlined on how to set things up. And terrain's a bigger part of the game. You know, it has its own rules. And the line of sight blocking was super critical. And I learned that the hard way in my intro games.
So how are you both finding the new terrain rules? Make sense, or does it add an extra layer which we'd hoped that Games Workshop would have taken off?
Well, yeah, it's added an extra layer of complexity, but only the first few times you sort of play it. Once you've gotten into your brain what a ruin is and what like the manufactorum parts do, and once you've played a couple of games and you've got the core thing of like, okay, all the busy spindly terrain is -1 to hit, the heavy rocky and building based terrain is the +1 armor save, that sort of thing. I think you're all right, and having the reference page open in the book I found was key, where it has pictures of what the different terrain types look like and what keywords they have. Once you've cross-referenced that in like 2 or 3 games, you can kind of get it down. And now terrain's important. You get to make decisions around your terrain, whether you're going to overwatch or defend the terrain piece for combat, things like that. I think it's made it more of a part of the game rather than I put my Space Marines in here so they have a 2+ save. Like, that's not always the case now, and you have to kind of think about the pros and cons. I really like that.
Yeah, I haven't really used them too much, just because the few games of 9th edition I've played are either with new units and new rules or against someone with a new army, so we didn't try to sort of convolute it and confuse matters by adding an extra layer for the terrain rules. I like them on paper. We, as in myself and Rich, have played a few games of Urban Conquest where terrain had their own rules. And it's when you're playing a comfortable game with armies that you're comfortable with, it's a great layer to add on top. As a new player to 9th edition, I would advise that would be one of the first things to maybe sort of drop for the first few games until you get used to the rule system, and then add it on after. But yeah, the again, the cinematic style of reinforcing ruins and settling down into bunkers and stuff is cool, and it's not just line of sight blocking now. It does something, like Rich said.
Do you think with this edition, Games Workshop are now more leaning towards competitive play because it sells more models as they tweak the rules and new units become the new hotness and the meta changes, Dave?
No, I mean, call me an optimist, but I don't think it's for monetary reasons. I think it's just a balancing act. And when they bring out new units that are ridiculously overpowered, sometimes they're overpowered for the rules that are coming out later. So maybe in a new codex that's coming out 3 months later, I don't know, for example, the Elder jet bikes could be ridiculous for 3 months when they get new rules, but then when they get the new codex, it might dial them back. And I don't want to say things are nerfed or buffed. I think it's just a case of people adapting and knowing how to deal with something. I mean, we were talking off air about your scions, and people underestimate them, and then when you start shooting, you realize that they've got a ridiculous minus AP, and they don't know what to deal with them, and maybe they've shot your Tauroxes in the Scions army rather than dealing with the actual threat, which are the Scions themselves. So I think it's just it's all in people's heads sometimes about what is good and what is not. Obviously, there are things that are good on paper and good on the battlefield, like Eradicators. And when the Grav Centurions were all the rage in seventh edition when Grav came out, and then they got dialed back. I say they got dialed back. The Grav rules got dialed back, and people learned to deal with them. I mean, with Centurions, you just used to get them in combat and they'd fall over. So I don't think it's for monetary reasons. I like to think it's just a case of people overreacting, reading the internet, like I referenced in one of my previous answers, and buying a load of stuff that is good for 3 months of the year.
Yeah, I think a lot of people assume that GW are the constant scam money grabbers, whereas I think what they've proved in the last couple of years, and if you don't believe me, go and look at their share price, is they are about building their business. From the business angle, they're about building their business consistently and making a great basis to run a business from, and having things change all the time and people pick up and drop stuff is not good for that, for people with who want to look at it from that angle. And from the direction they're pushing the game, I think they're pushing it the other way. I think everything seems to be leaning towards the narrative angles now. They're pushing Crusade hard. Everything's getting new Crusade rules with the narrative theming of the game. The new boxes are based on 25 power level, which is surprisingly this starting Crusade game size they recommend, and they're kind of driving the story elements again. And all the Psychic Awakening books, yes, they gave new rules to everybody, but they also told a very long story across a succession of books. So I think that's more the direction they're going with. But I mean, it depends whether you're someone who's enthusiastic about the hobby and looks to enjoy things, or if you're a tinfoil hat wearing person on the internet, and then you can pick your camp, I think.
Please note at this time in the interview, I'd like to mention that if you do play against my Scions and myself, please shoot the Taurox. They are the biggest thing. Don't listen to Dave. Have you guys got a favourite way to play? As you mentioned, the Crusade is now, personally for us as a gaming group as well, 2021 will be the year of Crusade, where each of us will be doing a 50 power level Crusade army and trying to get as many games in as we can with that, and then seeing how we do, shockingly, at the end of it. Are you more narrative players, or do you enjoy a good competitive smash face? Rich?
I mean, we bill ourselves as a narrative-based podcast, right? That's our thing, and that's because that's the part of the game that Dave and I are most excited by, is the story, the cinematic way to play the game. Setting up missions with a reason into fight in mind, and all those sort of things. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we could probably get something out of competitive play, but it's just not for us. But we never want to run it down. Like, if that's the way people enjoy the game, like, crack on and do that. But we really, really enjoy that narrative element, and the best game matchups we've had most of the time is with people of the same mindset, which is why I think it's important to highlight there is no right or wrong way to play the game. There's just a right or wrong way to approach the game with your opponent. And yeah, we're way more narrative leaning, and sometimes that can we can spend more time talking about the narrative of a game and the story of the game than the actual game takes to play, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, I think it comes down to, do you remember a game from 3 years ago that you just had a random game with someone and nothing much happened and loads of stuff died and you tabled them in 3 turns? Great. But you're more likely to remember even a loss or a close game where something really cool happened. And I think that is what I get out of the hobby, and it's the cool, like the cool cinematic style of it. So it's the Crusade really, or the Crusade way of playing really appeals to me as a player. It's the sort of the RPG element of it. I used to really like More Time, the game, because you used to level up your band of merry warriors, or not so merry in More Time. But it's that leveling up. It's the whole RPG, the sort of the Skyrim, the Warcraft style to it. And we bill ourselves as a narrative podcast from a narrative imagination point of view, not so necessarily the narrative style of playing, because I wasn't too on board with power level before. We always used to play cinematic games using matched play rules because points were so much easier to balance, or they felt more balanced. However, with this whole push over Crusade, and the new codexes even have their own Crusade rules, Games Workshop are very much focusing on the narrative play side of things, and I think the new power levels that are coming up are much more balanced, as long as your opponent and yourself do not take the mick by sort of all having your death company with 2 Thunderhammers, that sort of thing, because you can, but you shouldn't. Although I don't know if that's a rule anymore. I don't know if they can take 2 Thunderhammers.
Let's pretend that it is, Dave, because our technical knowledge of the codexes isn't the strongest.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it depends when this comes out. The Blood Angel Codex might be out by then.
That's true. That's true.
So you guys both obviously transitioned from like 7, 8, now 9th. Do you guys miss templates and scatter dice?
Oh. I think this has got to be answered, and I'm sure Rich is going to say exactly the same as me, and I think it's got to be answered 2 ways. I love the style of it, being able to see, like, when you put the sort of the flamer template down, you can imagine him sort of sweeping with a flamer. It's the interpretation of how many models are hit with your opponent that was probably the most cause of arguments over a game of 40k, even between us. We're one of those. We're lucky. We like the element of it, and we're usually erring on the side of caution. Yeah, you could probably hit those 4, or just dice roll it. 1, 2, 3, you do. 4, 5, 6, you don't. Move on. But yeah, I loved the randomness of scatters as well, and there was always an element to deep striking as well. When your models could go off the board, or they could land on a building, or they could land on impassable terrain and possibly would be wiped out. That was quite cool. But it's the interpretation side that was just a cause of many arguments, and I don't miss that one bit.
Yeah, what Dave said. But I will add in, I really miss the scatter dice for deep striking, because I used to love with deep striking where you could take the tactical safe play of dropping them further back from the lines to make sure you're in the right position, and the dice would kind of hinder or help you a little bit there. Or you could make that bold move. You could make that, I'm deep striking my Terminators right in the middle of this absolute mess, because that's what they would do in 40k. The Terminators would be teleported into the heart of the battle where they have to fight the hardest. You can't do that anymore, and I really miss that kind of, like, if they die, they die, but they're going to go for the heroic play here. I miss that a lot. But I don't miss arguing with my opponent. And the moment when you're playing someone you don't know and you roll the scatter dice, and either they've gone at a very, very different angle when they've moved their stuff, or you've lined up the tape measure over the dice because you're kind like that, and they've gone, oh, actually, I think it's about 3 degrees to the left. That sets the tone for the game for me, and I don't miss that at all.
So you mentioned the new boxes that are coming out, which are like Combat Patrol, 25 power level box, which if you guys were given a chance to make a start collecting box for any faction, say 1 HQ, Troop, Fast Attack and Heavy Support, what would it be? Starting with Rich.
Yeah, I went for an unusual choice here, and I think it would be cool to have it for the Harlequins. Now, I don't know how that fits within the 25 power level. Shh, Dave, don't spoil it. Yeah, I think I don't know how that fits within their army, but I would very much like to see a box set for them because they're a really good bolt-on force, and they're an army that you can collect on its own. So having a box set that would be, like I'm going to get the names right here, Dave, if I try hard enough.
I'll correct you.
The Shadow Seer, that's the HQ. A Troop, which is also the Troop's choice. Well done, Games Workshop there. The Sky Weaver jet bikes.
Yep.
And there's no heavy support choice available. So, well, there is if you choose the Void Weaver / Star Weaver transport vehicle. Yeah. So that kit could perform both roles, or it can transport the unit that comes in the box, and I think that would be a cool box set because it's either a bolt-on for an Eldar collector already, it's a kill team basically in a box if you want to play kill team, and it's also something that you could start with as a starting point for a Harlequin set.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Yeah, I went for something slightly different, and I went for an alternate force to something that's already out there. So I went for Tau, and I really like the stealth side of the Tau Empire. So I went for something like the Ghost Kill, which is an issue because that is £50 on its own. I did a bit of research into this.
Wow.
But yeah, so the Ghost Kill, some sniper drones, some stealth suits, and the HQ. I would be tempted to put Shadow Sun in there, but the only issue is that she's a named character, so there could be some liabilities about that. But I'd like to see more niche start collecting boxes. Sort of, I think they did it with the Wraith Eldar army, didn't they?
Yeah.
So they had a Wraith army, and they had the more mobile sort of Wave Serpent and Jet Bike army for the Eldar. So they sort of branch off with them. So maybe a Tau stealth start collecting box would be quite cool.
Yeah, I think everyone normally looks for the Christmas boxes, don't they? Because I've noticed recently in years gone by that the Christmas boxes are really good deals. And a big shout out to, Old Average Brit Gaming Nick, who every year does a breakdown of our Christmas boxes we get from GW.
Love them.
So, if he doesn't do that video every year, I get extremely annoyed because if that happens, I badger him to make sure he does it because it's good knowledge to be armed with before you make a purchase.
It is, and it's the reason why I've got an Eldar Wraith army.
Blame him.
Yeah, pretty much. Armies and box sets have also been from Forge World as well. So Forge World kits, which people may not know, started as resin, which made their way across the plastic, like the Baneblade. That was a resin kit. And the Valkyrie. That was actually a resin kit. It's a horrible resin kit to put together, but
I can imagine.
They actually had a crew inside, all sitting down, of Elysian drop troopers.
R.I.P.
Ooh.
Yeah. So if you guys could pull a model unit from Forge World over to the GW mainstream, what would it be? Starting with Dave.
Probably because it hits home the most, and again another controversial unit choice, but the Death Corps, basically anything from the Death Corps range. Probably the infantry, because I think the smaller models are more finicky when it comes to the Forge World resin. The big the big tanks and the big aircraft have big panels that you can mold into shape a lot easier than the flimsy sort of shovels and las rifles of the Death Corps infantry. So I would like to see. I know there's a few iterations of them, like on guard and advancing, but yeah, maybe like an all-encompassing Death Corps infantry box would be quite nice. Using
memes.
Imperial Guard rules.
Sorry, Dave, say that again.
Using Imperial Guard rules now, obviously.
Yeah, memes aside, for me, I think it would be the Thunderhawk. Yes, I know it's a running joke, but for me, it's like the iconic Forge World model. It was seen by so many people for so long as the ultimate Forge World model. Even though they brought out the Manta, which was obviously enormous, no one was ever going to buy that thing. The Thunderhawk was the one, and so I would dearly love to see that in plastic, although I very much doubt it'll ever happen. If it does, I'll be very happy to eat my hat over it. But I just think it looks fantastic, and I know they've just reworked the mold, which is good news because I understand the previous one was an absolute pig to assemble. I know a couple of people who've built one, and they're full of complaints. So hopefully the new one's better.
I saw someone with a Manta at a campaign weekend once. Were you at that one?
Are you sure it was a
Rich?
Manta, Dave, and not a tiger shark?
No, it was a Manta, and we were all crowding around it because it was amazing. Didn't use it in a game, obviously, because points. But yeah, it's amazing to look at in person, and it's so intricate. You can sort of take the panels off, and there's stuff inside, which he'd painted, and you'd probably want someone to paint it if they'd bought that.
Yeah, there is a commissioned painter in America who's got like 3 of them, I believe. He's got beautiful. Have you guys got any hobby regrets, like units you bought? Because my personal hobby regret is I actually owned a Thunderhawk transporter.
That's so cool, though.
Yeah, it's one of the coolest models I have. I magnetised the rhinos underneath.
Yes.
The rhinos come off and drove away, but I sold it.
Oh.
I needed the money at the time.
Yeah, fair. That's fair.
It was either that or a kidney, and I quite enjoy only having one kidney. So, do you guys have any hobby regrets of like units you bought, which you thought, oh, why did I buy these, or stuff you've sold on?
I sold my first Imperial Guard army because I needed to make space and needed some money, and I converted all the models. Almost all the models in the army were converted. I painted camo striping on all of their fatigues, which for Guard is a big deal, and I sold it for a fraction of what it was worth, and I was absolutely gutted. And I loved that army, and I really wish I could get it back, but sadly not. So yeah, major hobby regret for me.
Yeah, down the same route was my old Tomb King's army and old Salamander's armies. The Salamander's army went through hell, and it was my first. I think it was maybe my first or second, maybe to the Templar Space Marine army that I had, and it was really cool. Looking back, it wasn't the greatest painted one. But when I moved out of my parents' house many moons ago, I just found them in bits and all sorts because they were all part of. I didn't have very good storage solutions back then because I didn't have Rich's hobby tips, obviously. And yeah, I didn't sell any of it. I just threw it away because they were all in bits. And it was the same with the Tomb Kings as well, because skeletons just disintegrate, both in game and on shelves. So I've still got bits of my Tomb Kings army, but my regrets is throwing them all away rather than maybe rebuilding them and just having them as like a reminder of what my old armies used to look like.
So you spoke about campaign weekends and going to these. Normally they're split up into forces, like sides, like the good side and the bad side. Is the Imperium actually the good side in 40k, Dave?
No.
Yes. No. I mean, I don't think there is a good side. I mean, a side without a conscience maybe is the Tyranids.
I've heard this argument put forward as the Tyranids are the closest thing to a good guy because they're just surviving as far as we know.
They don't actively they don't try to make other people's lives a misery for their own gain. It's just for devouring. The Imperium, there are parts of the Imperium that are good.
Are there?
Say the Remembrances and the Artists and
Okay.
the nice worlds that, like the agricultural worlds where people are just farmers. But the Imperium on the whole is a dark, depressing, horrific place that I can't believe we sing their praises. Because if you explain the Imperium to anyone and then say that they're your favourite and you love everything about them, it's not going to come across very well.
No.
And yourself, Rich?
No, I'm very much the same mindset. Like my son asked me, "Are they the good guys?" Pointed to the Space Marines, and I was like, "Yes, they're the good guys." And inside, I'm thinking, "Well, that's a complicated question. You can't explain viewpoints to a 6-year-old, so you just kind of have to roll with, yes, they're the heroes." And inside, you're like, "No, they're really not." Yeah.
It's a complicated answer to a very simple question.
Yes. Because they're not, because when a child asks that question, they're not really asking the same question that you're trying to answer as a grown up. So no, it does amuse me a lot.
So you're both well known for the Hobby Positive podcast, the Floorhammer Podcast. How did that come about, Rich?
Well, Dave just said, "Oh, do you know what? For ages, I've been musing about the idea of starting my own podcast, and hey, it just would be a really cool idea just to talk the hobby." And I said, "Well, then why don't we?" And it was little more complicated than that. It was you had your wedding. You had your wedding coming up, Dave. I remember, and you were like, "Well, I can't do any planning and things before that." So we decided to just do it after that, and to just record a couple of episodes and see how it goes. We didn't even tell our friends and hobby group that we were doing it until we were like 3 episodes in, to make sure we kind of got our feet under ourselves a little bit and knew what we wanted to do. But it wasn't a huge amount of planning went into it, really, Dave, was there? It was just kind of, this would be cool to do, so why not try it? We fail.
There was from my side, just because you said I've been musing about it for a while. I used to listen to so many different podcasts. I still do. Not so many now. I've sort of moved on to YouTube or audiobooks because it's usually when I painted, or commutes as well. So I work from home most of the time, although everyone is now working from home if they're lucky enough to be able to do so. But yeah, it was just sort of listening to some of the big podcasts like Independent Characters and Forge the Narrative, and I just thought a lot of podcasts are very America centric, and they didn't really speak to me in a way that I got on with. They were either a bit too competitive, or they were reflecting sort of American point of views, and I really wanted to sort of talk hobby because this was at a point where we were starting to move apart as a hobby group, because we all started to live our own lives. Like Rich said, I was getting married, and I moved out of the area as well. So it was a good way to keep in touch with the hobby that was always on the back burner before we started doing the podcast. It was always like one of those, not a minor hobby, but one of those things that I did in the background. And it was a way to keep in touch with like-minded players in the community, like Rich. And we've discovered a brand new community that I had no idea existed through the podcast. So yeah, but that's how it came about. We bought a few things off Amazon relatively cheap, just in case it didn't get off the ground. And people were straight away said that our quality of sound, maybe not necessarily content, but quality of sound was very good. And it sort of went from there. And lucky I had I work in sort of an IT field, so I had ways to get the correct software, and I knew what to look out for, and through work I could pick up various cables, that sort of thing. So we started off on a budget, and it's sort of spiraled out of control there. I think we just released episode 66 the other day. In fact, was it yesterday it came out?
It was, yes.
Losing track of time. So
From
yeah,
this point of recording, of course.
Yeah.
Episode 66, and we are how many years in? 2?
It's about 2.5 years we've been doing this
Yeah.
now, and yeah, we're still enjoying it, which is the key thing, I think.
It's we've been lucky that the I say viewers, the listeners have steadily been increasing sort of exponentially over those 2 years, and we've managed to enter the homes of lots of people over the years.
You know, steadily
Bounce.
increasing and exponentially mean two different things, don't you, Dave?
Yeah, well, yeah. Sorry.
Okay, good. I just thought I'd clear that up.
It started steady. And over the last few months, it's been increasing a lot. I guess it has. Yeah, I'm going to stop talking. But
Yeah, it would be remiss of me not to criticise you on a choice of words, Dave. Come on.
Yeah, it's been rising, and we've had lots of lovely messages from people in the community reaching out to us. So
yeah, the community's really supportive. Like, I mean, you yourself included, Matt. Like, people get involved with commenting on your stuff and letting us know what they think of the episodes, and that really helps us a lot.
Yeah. I mean, we've taken on board. We used to sort of record whole musings about bat reps for like 45 minutes, and just through sort of feedback and different sections as well. I'd like to think we've improved it over the years.
You guys have set yourself a very challenging schedule of recording every 2 weeks and releasing. Has this got the ability to affect your enjoyment in podcasting, because maybe you've got to schedule it around family times and other events? Rich?
Yeah, we do aim for the 2 weekly release. Initially, we actually saw that it was a big issue with regards to like algorithms or something, where it made a big difference to people accessing the show. But that seems to have kind of actually shifted recently. And you know, we do the podcast together, but Dave and I are good friends, and we both understand that family commitments, work commitments, etc., all come first, and neither of us would pressure the other to do the show if we're not up to it. I mean, at least once, more than once on both sides, I would say, we've been like, oh, this has come up, I might need to postpone, then been like, no, it's okay, we can go ahead. And then we've kind of said to each other, are you really sure you want to go ahead and not just want to bump it back? And we've almost like talked the other person into making sure they take that space to not pressure each other, because we do this for fun. It's not a job. And also at the end of the day, if we're trying to rush it and squish it in or whatever, it's not going to make for a good podcast, and people aren't going to want to listen to it. So kind of on both fronts, we recognise the need to be flexible with it.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. That pretty much reflects my thoughts. It's nice that it's a relaxed environment. It's not a job. This is for fun. We don't do it for monetary reasons, and I mean, we don't earn anything from it, so we don't feel obliged that we need to stick to a strict schedule. And if something does pop up, there's no sort of malicious intent. We can just bump it back a few days and release it, say, on a Monday and instead of our normal Friday.
How far in advance do you plan your episodes, Dave? Do you have like a 6 month sort of ish plan?
I think you're closer to 6 hours. No. We have topics. We've banked up topics, and often topics get pushed back, or we access topics that are relevant for the last couple of weeks. So if we focused a lot recently over we focused a lot about sort of mental health and the mental challenges of the hobby over the sort of the lockdown period, because it was quite something that affected both of us and so many people across the world, really, when they're sort of locked inside, and we flesh out a lot of the notes quite soon before we record, just to keep it fresh and we know what we're talking about. And obviously we can't fill out stuff like the Games Workshop releases until pretty much like half an hour before the episode comes out, because the community are so fluid and they're constantly updating their site, that if we put down all our thoughts sort of a couple of days before the episode comes out, we might miss some big releases during the week. So yeah, and we record on a Monday, so missing a weekend of releases could be not disastrous, because it makes it sound scary, but no, we might miss out something, and then you've got to wait sort of another 2 weeks, 3 weeks before the episode really comes out again, because allowing for editing time. So we don't plan them too far in advance, just from the sort of the fluid nature. The topics are slightly different, but yeah, it's really only hours before.
Yeah, I think we both have topics that we want to talk about in the back of our minds. And Dave and I kind of take a work-ish approach to how we prep for the recordings, to treat it like running a meeting at work. So that's a minor element of professionalism creeps in sometimes. But I just think that we each structure our prep in our own way, so that it's good to go for the two of us in the different way we kind of like to plan these things out. But it's a mishmash of last minute panic combined with long term planning, and it seems to come out in the wash quite well.
Yeah, there's a lot of improv to the show, just because we like to treat it as almost like a conversation that we invite people to listen to, rather than a news report, which if we were doing like a daily, a weekly show, we might have a structured, this came out this week, this means this means this also came out, something released here. Whereas we very much like to have a conversation and talk about it and describe our own feelings and how it's sort of gone down in the community, rather than just facts.
Have you got a top 3 Dave hobby excuses, Rich?
Oh, there have been some good ones, and I do you know what? I keep a lot of content notes, and one of the few things I haven't done is written down Dave's excuses. I just don't think I want to hold him accountable to them. I'm pretty sure he's got his Dave playbook of reasons I haven't hobbied. However, certain ones that do come to mind are him blaming the weather once, which is about the most British thing you can do. It was too warm, and it's just not even during a heat wave.
Fair enough.
Not even during a heat wave, just it was a bit too warm and he hadn't got some stuff done because he didn't really feel like it. I'd much rather he just said I didn't really feel like it, and I'd accept that better than the excuse he tries to build around it. He has claimed that coming to pick something up from my house that he needed was a hobby progress. So he tried to build that into an episode as at least 2 minutes worth of content. And he once claimed that work travel had seriously eaten into his hobby session, but it because of the way the show recordings are blocked up, and it's this 2-week rota, it basically ate into like 1 to 1.5 days from a 2-week schedule. But he tried to garner sympathy around work-related travel, which I wasn't buying into at all. So there's definitely been some creativity, and it always catches me off guard just how creative Dave can be when excusing himself from doing nothing. His job must be fascinating.
Talk about creativity, Rich. Dave's comments about yourself at the start of the shows are quite comical. He actually paid me to say that, about being saving soulless like a Necron. And have you got a favourite one, Dave?
Oh, that I've insulted Rich with. A few come to mind. I quite like the one the other day. It's a few episodes back, where I misheard Rich talking about his love of sisters. It was the other one was the one when I called him a repulsive lover for Valentine's Day.
Yep.
But I think my favourite one was when I said that the light reflecting off his head guided ships back to Terra as the light of the Astronomicon. Yeah,
I think that is possibly my favourite one as well. I did warn Dave when he did this on the first episode. I'm like, you've set yourself up to come up with something amusing, 40k related and topical every other week, but he hasn't failed yet.
Or topical.
Yeah.
Yeah, not all of them are 40k based.
No, Boris Johnson's fed you a few good resources, isn't he? Anyway,
yeah.
Let's not go down that road.
So, Dave, you've alluded to it. You're now released number 66 at time of recording, so possibly 67 when this gets released at the start of December. Have you got a favourite episode to date, personally?
Yeah, the first one that comes to mind, and I think it was a fan favourite as well, was the big fat quiz of Warhammer, Floorhammer, I should say, which was I think it was the episode 50.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, the sort of the half century of episodes, and I had a lot of fun writing the questions and coming and trying to sort of amuse myself with what Rich would say. But there have been a few other ones. That was a funny one. There's been a few topics, especially with the motivation and the mental impact of the hobby, that have hit home, and they've been sort of favourites of mine for different reasons. So, but no, from a running it and listening back to it as well, because we have to listen back to it to edit it, which can be a bit mind-numbing sometimes when we know exactly what we're going to say and we're just listening for basically swearing. So
we've cut all that, Dave. We've cut all that.
We have cut all that, but yeah, no, it's got to be the big fat quiz of Floorhammer, which was my favourite.
I really enjoyed the 2 minutes 40k Q&A, despite it being the worst named segment in episode 40. That was good with listener questions answered by us. The Xenos episode with Tim joining us, who filled in when Dave was on paternity leave, because I was very generous and gave him 4 weeks. That was episode 56.
Too generous.
Yeah. Tim is very much like-minded like us in the hobby, so it was a great fit to have him come and talk Xenos, because we are a little too Imperium focused sometimes, we get told, but I think that's mostly people jibing on us.
Yeah.
And the hit home episode was for me episode 57, where we talked about hobby happiness. It was a really important topic for me, I really felt good about, I suppose, giving people that view into the hobby not always being perfect. And I think that those hit home topics have been good for us to talk to, because yes, we do the funny larking around, but the hobby can be quite serious sometimes, and it's good to cover, I think, both aspects. It's a good representation of what the hobby is.
While doing this show, you've highlighted a number of products which people may not be aware of. Have you got any surprises which may have surprised yourself when you found them, Rich?
The latest episode, actually, episode 66, I talked about a paint stripper, BioStrip 20, I think it's called. I was blown away by how well it stripped paint off, metal models that I did it on, but it would work on plastic as well, and resin for very short-term use. And it's completely safe and doesn't smell, so you can use it in your house without any concerns around safety. If you've got kids, it's not a danger to them, and your partner won't complain about you stinking the house out like I get when I use anything with white spirits in. So it's I couldn't believe how well it worked. There have been a few products. Also I talk about making my own stuff on the cheap, as everyone likes to make fun of. But this one is one of the few where it's a purchase product that is 100% worth it. And my friend told me about it, and I didn't believe it was that good. And then I tried it and was genuinely surprised.
It's exactly the one that I would have brought up. Yeah, this latest episode, the paint stripper. We've all heard the sort of the Dettol products and the horrible goopy stuff that you put them into and it just melts your models. But yeah, if what Rich says is true, then it sounds like a fantastic product. A few others come to mind, things that I've discovered over the course of doing the podcast that I probably wouldn't have attempted. Stuff like oil paints, I would have never touched them. I don't use them extensively. I know lots of hobby miniature painters swear by it, and it gives like beautiful blends and all that sort of jazz. But yeah, the oil paints and stuff like different techniques that Rich has talked about in his hobby tips, like panel lining, have been eye-opening, to say the least.
So, Rich, you made the big jump across to YouTube. Welcome. Are you enjoying making the videos?
I mean, the comment section's kind of, and I was led to believe, but we don't have the biggest number of viewers, so it's probably correlates. Yeah, I have really enjoyed it, actually. The process of making the videos was actually a lot easier than I expected it to be, I do it all on my phone, so I'm surprised at the ease of editing the videos and getting everything sorted out. I thought it would be very, very complicated to produce something that looks reasonably good, but it wasn't too bad at all.
Yeah, I think the comment section is always fun. It's when people make fake Instagram accounts, just send you rude messages. That's when you know you've made it.
That's when you've made it. We haven't got abused by anybody yet, Dave, so we clearly haven't made it, mate.
No.
So a big shout out to the person who sent me a rude message last month. I love it.
What a hobby hero they are.
Yeah.
Not.
Yeah. These videos are your large project. Does it help you to sort of like catalogue what you've actually done instead of like having a notebook or scraps of paper?
I think Dave and I have both discovered that having social media or whatever form or the podcasts themselves are a great way of reminding yourself what you've done. Yes, for the hobby build, it's been great because I can go back and re-watch what I did for a particular colour or effect on a piece of terrain to make it match up. And the whole point of the vlogging was to kind of do the process and have people kind of come and watch along with you. I'm not doing it as like necessarily a tutorial to teach you how to do any one particular project. It's more like, hey, here's this hobby thing I'm doing. Watch me bumble through it if you're interested. So it's been good.
So Dave, Rich has been a big pusher of 3D printing for this project. Do you think that Games Workshop will ever sell their products as just STL files?
No. I think they're a company that pride themselves on quality, and if they start sending out STL files to everyone, they're more likely to be pirated, losing themselves money, and I think they can't control the quality of sort of Joe Bloggs' down the road's 3D printer, as opposed to their massive VAT machines of injection molding and I don't think companies will ever, or the companies the size of Games Workshop will ever, at least solely base their products on 3D printing. They might down the line. I mean, we don't know about business practices in the industry later down the line, but maybe out of production stuff they might sell as STL files for people that want sort of bits and bobs. But no, I don't see them venturing into 3D printing just because the quality of their current stuff is just so much better than anyone can produce.
And the uptake would... Sorry, Dave.
Unless they spend thousands of pounds.
And I think the uptake would be lower. Like, I mean, we know a lot of hobbyists. I can guarantee you the majority of them would not want to jump through the hoops that are required in order to 3D print something. And I realize technology will get better and 3D printing will become easier and easier as the future goes. But some people will just not, a lot of people will just not bother going through the effort of having to 3D print stuff when you can buy a box of pre-manufactured miniatures off the shelf. I think that, and they're going to be made out of plastic, whereas 3D printing is resin, which comes with its own space and safety setup requirements that, again, buying a box of pre-made plastic, you just can't beat. On top of Dave's comment around quality, because having 3D printed a bunch of stuff, it is not as good right now.
You know what's going to happen? There's going to be like a BBC article in 10 years' time. Like they did with the internet will never catch up. the internet will never start up, and it'll be 3D printing. Big miniature companies will never turn to 3D printing.
If in 10 years' time a major news network is referencing anything you and I have said, Dave, I'll be happy.
I made it.
So as I say, like in this digital age, we're now all very big content consumers. Have you each got, say, a top 3 channels on YouTube, which you are your go-to channels, Rich?
I mean, let me just check my contracts as I rifle through my paperwork. I think I'm obliged to promote Old Average Brit Wargaming, and
No!
Old Average Brit Gaming?
what is it?
Gaming. Old Average Brit
Oh
Gaming.
my God! I've done it again. Right.
I'm
Yeah,
leaving
let me
this
just
in.
check through. You're leaving this in, fair
I'm
enough.
leaving this
Let
in,
me
yeah.
just. I'll pretend that you're not, and I'll give you the option to choose the right or wrong path, Matt.
Just start swearing.
I believe
cut it out.
I believe I'm contractually obliged to mention Old Average Brit Gaming and Warzone Morlock, who genuinely I do watch pretty much every single thing that they put out. But I guess my go-tos are Black Magic Craft, which I already mentioned before, for lots of terrain goodness. I'm really hooked into watching videos by Bard's Craft at the moment. It's a Finnish guy, and he makes really cool-looking terrain out of, generally speaking, mostly household items. And he has a very, very dry sense of humour, which particularly appeals to me. And Midwinter Minis. Guy from Midwinter Minis, his channel's like exploded, but I'm going to sound proper hipster and say that I've watched it for years, and he's such a nice guy, and he's like super passionate about the hobby, and that really shows through. And I think all 3 people that I've mentioned, they genuinely love doing their hobby, and it definitely shows in their content.
Oh, sorry, yeah. I had a very good chat with Guy. He was a really nice guy. I think I subbed when his channel was only like 400 subs, bless him. And I've actually got a video. I've actually got photographic proof. So in the link below is me subbing at 400 subs. So if anyone says like, "Oh,
Nice.
you didn't do it," so I was there before he got all.
Before he was famous.
Yeah.
YouTube hipsters.
Yeah.
No, I mean, for me, I don't watch channels or sort of hobby tutorial channels as a whole. I tend to watch something specific, and I'll have maybe go-to channels if I'm looking for a specific technique. But I mean, my top 3 channels on YouTube when it comes to the hobby, it's got to be sort of Warhammer TV. Is number 1. So I mean, all sorts. This is Games Workshop's official one. So they've got tutorials on how to paint stuff. They've got reveal trailers, all sorts of stuff. So I guess that one goes without saying. The other one's Tabletop Tactics, the well-known Bat Rep content creators. We've mentioned Mike the chef on the show a few times. He was part of our gaming group back when he lived in our area. Obviously, he's moved further afield to work full time on Tabletop Tactics. And Miniac as well is a good one to watch. He's very funny, knows a lot about what he's doing, but it's not up to that ridiculous standard that you can't follow. He's got that style that you or I could achieve if we sort of spent a lot of time on a miniature, whereas some of these guys are ridiculous and they all know their proper color theory, and they follow like the sort of Bob Ross style of mixing paints together to make a pale elf flesh sort of style. But no, Miniac is hilariously funny as well, so it always appeals to me.
Do you both see that this is a positive and a negative effect on the hobby? That sometimes you can jump down a rabbit hole 2 feet and end up somewhere in Australia with content? Because I've watched some like painting tutorials where I was like, oh no, I really can't do that. And it's like, the wet blending, and then and like there's me dry brushing with a paintbrush I used to paint the house wall with.
Like I just said, you should watch tutorials that very much are down your sort of style of painting or down your ability of painting. I quite like watching. Oh God, I've forgotten the channel name. Is it JH John.
Oh,
Juan
JH Miniatures. Yeah.
Yeah, his stuff is ridiculous, and I could never emulate it. But I like looking at it for reference and seeing how the top artists use stuff, and I could maybe use a bastardized version of that technique. But no, I think it's very much a rabbit hole that you could fall into if you start thinking that you might be able to emulate these things. I'm not saying don't try it, but if you get into your mindset of, oh, this is easy, I'm going to be able to do it, and then when your one comes out as pants and nowhere near the final result, you could get a bit disheartened.
And I think the key thing about the people that both of us have mentioned actually is that they all show when they get it wrong. Which I think for me is a massive difference. There have been YouTube tutorials where I've watched them and been like, well, that looks really easy and it looks really good. And it probably does if you know what you're doing. But I prefer the more realistic ones where they're like, sometimes things go wrong, or it won't come out looking like this, or, you know, that are a bit more, I don't know, show that
my first attempt.
It's not infallible. Like this won't necessarily come out like you won't be able to necessarily copy what I can do, but here is some learning that you can take away. And I think that sort of approach is much better for personal. I mean, if you're looking to really challenge yourself and push yourself, then I think Darren Latham's channel is still sort of live on YouTube to some extent, and you're not going to get better than that.
Yeah.
Not you mentioned Duncan Rhodes. That's quite surprising.
Oh, did you need to mention Duncan Rhodes? Yes, I'm part of his Paint Academy subscription thing, and it's exactly what you expected it to be. It's Duncan Unchained, and it's great.
Steady.
Yep.
I think it's the first time I saw him use a non-Games Workshop paint. I nearly fell off my chair, you know.
Yeah.
It's when he was painting on a dinner plate. That's what I really liked. Like his first palette was literally a white dinner plate from his kitchen. I was like, yeah, this is quality.
I used a wall tile, like a laminated wall tile for.
He moved on to wall tiles, but honestly, the first couple of episodes he's using a plate, and I just loved it.
So, Rich, where can people find you on the internet?
Oh, there's two ways this can go. There's the way where I answer the question you directed at me, or I let Dave do his usual spiel. So shall I try and be Dave? Because this is his part of the show.
Go on. I know.
So you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Floorhammer Podcast, our website, floorhammerpodcast.com, and our Instagram handle at Floorhammer_podcast.
Nailed
Thanks,
it.
guys, for listening. Oh, wait, no, that's the rest of your spiel.
And YouTube as well. What's the YouTube account?
Floorhammer Podcast, I think.
Nice. Good advertising.
Matt can do some cool technical stuff on YouTube that will link it to our channel, so I don't have to remember.
Oh, links in description.
This is 2020, Dave. Like cards, you got to point to the screen. Come on, man.
Pointing below, even though you can't see me pointing.
I watch so much YouTube content on my iPad, and there is nothing below the window they're talking about, and I have to minimize it, then scroll down, all that good stuff.
So, guys, final question, because everyone's like, hurry up and get on with it. Does pineapple belong on pizza, Dave?
Oh, I'm going to sit on the fence on this.
No one sits on the fence on this. What are you doing?
No, because it's a fruit and doesn't belong on pizza. But yes, because I absolutely love Hawaiian pizza.
But tomatoes are fruits as well.
Yeah, exactly. And so is an olive, Dave.
That's true. Oh, the olives can... I almost swore then. Olives can die.
Okay.
I suppose tomatoes are... Yeah, I stand corrected. Yes. Pineapple does belong on pizza because I love Hawaiian pizza.
Yep, absolutely. And the surprise pizza that I absolutely love and that I used to laugh at for a long time is the Tim special from Tim, who's been on the podcast. It is jalapeno and pineapple on a pizza, just those two things. And it's spicy and sweet and sour at the same time, and it's great.
Sounds horrific, but
it does sound horrific.
Until you try it.
I laughed, and then I tried a slice, and I'm like, wow, that's really good.
Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me today for this community spotlight of your awesome twosome.
No, thanks
Thank you very much for having us.
No, thanks for having us, Matt. It's really cool, and a big thanks, I guess, to you from the hobby community for doing these spotlights and giving people a chance to to chat with you about hobby, because not enough of that sort of thing happens, and people never say thanks often enough. So thanks.
Oh, I'm blushing now.
Oh, good job you're not on camera then.
No. I can't show my face. It's like... Okay. Well, big thank you from me, and a big thank you from those guys for listening and watching and realising that I've not actually shown my face on camera in any of these interviews, and I don't plan to, so please stop asking. Take care and good night.